American gun laws are undergoing a seismic shift, one that could reshape the nation's relationship with firearms for decades to come. Congress, the Supreme Court, and a new wave of lawsuits are converging to challenge rules that have stood for nearly a century, setting the stage for a historic confrontation. At the heart of this battle are items regulated by the National Firearms Act, or NFA, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and shotguns. These weapons have long been at the center of America's most heated debates over gun rights and public safety. For decades, owning these meant background checks, registration, and a hefty tax. The process was designed to deter ownership and track every transfer, making it one of the strictest gun control systems in the country. But now, that system is under fire as never before, with both sides mobilizing for a legal battle that could upend the status quo. Congress recently eliminated the $200 transfer tax, the NFA's original backbone, a move that shocked both supporters and critics of gun regulation. Gun rights groups immediately sued, arguing that without the tax, the NFA's registration requirements are unconstitutional and should be struck down entirely. The government, led by the Department of Justice, is fighting back, claiming other taxes and its power to regulate interstate commerce still justify the registry. They argue that public safety and national security are at stake. This sets up a high-stakes legal showdown, government regulation versus Second Amendment rights, with both sides preparing for a battle that could reach the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court's recent Bruin decision has changed the legal landscape, requiring all gun laws to have clear historical roots and fit within the nation's tradition of firearm regulation. This new history and tradition test has already toppled gun control measures nationwide, forcing courts to reconsider laws that once seemed untouchable. Now, it's the main weapon in the fight against the NFA, as lawyers argue over what counts as true American tradition. The outcome could redefine federal gun regulation for generations, impacting not just current owners but future Americans as well. The stakes, the future of gun ownership in America, and the balance between individual rights and collective security. The legal and political world is watching closely as every decision could set a precedent for years to come. The next chapter in American gun law is being written right now, and its impact will echo far beyond the courtroom. To understand today's fight over gun laws, we need to go back to 1934, a time when America was reeling from the Great Depression and headlines were filled with stories of infamous gangsters. In response to a wave of violent crime, Congress passed the National Firearms Act. This law specifically targeted weapons associated with notorious criminals, like machine guns and sawed-off shotguns, that had become symbols of lawlessness. But Congress didn't have the constitutional power to ban these guns outright. Instead, they imposed a steep $200 tax on machine guns, suppressors, and short-barreled firearms, a sum that was nearly equivalent to a year's wages for many Americans at the time. In 1934, that was a fortune, deliberately set to keep these weapons out of reach for most ordinary citizens, especially during such hard economic times. The law also required every owner to register their weapon, creating a federal record of ownership and making it easier for the government to track these firearms. When the law was challenged, the Supreme Court upheld it in Sonzinski v. United States, declaring it a tax measure rather than a direct gun control law. This legal fiction allowed the government to tightly regulate certain firearms without directly confronting the protections of the Second Amendment. For decades, buying an NFA item meant navigating a maze of paperwork, submitting fingerprints, passing a background check, and enduring a long wait, sometimes months or even years. Millions of items have been registered under this system, but gun rights advocates have always viewed the process as an unconstitutional barrier to lawful ownership and a violation of personal freedoms. Over time, the NFA's tax-based system became the very foundation of federal gun regulation, shaping how firearms are controlled in America to this day. But with the tax now effectively gone, that foundation is starting to crumble, raising new questions about the future of gun laws. The stage is set for a major legal reckoning, one that could reshape the landscape of American gun rights and regulation for generations to come. The political wind shifted as a new sense of urgency swept through the halls of Congress. In 2024, after months of heated debate and public pressure, Congress passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, a sweeping piece of legislation that would change the landscape of American gun laws. President Trump signed it into law, and with a single decisive stroke of the pen, the controversial $200 transfer tax on suppressors and short-barreled firearms was erased from the books. Years of relentless lobbying by gun rights groups and advocates finally paid off. Suppressors, once known as hearing protection devices, were now more accessible to ordinary Americans than ever before. Supporters across the country hailed the bill as a major victory for common sense, personal freedom, and the Second Amendment, celebrating what they saw as a long overdue change. But this move did more than just cut a tax. It sent shockwaves through the legal and political system. By eliminating the tax, Congress fundamentally undermined the National Firearms Act's original constitutional justification, which had stood for nearly a century. The law's main defense in court had always been that it was a tax measure, not a form of gun control, a crucial distinction for its survival. With the tax now gone, that argument collapsed almost overnight, leaving the law vulnerable. What was meant as a clear win for gun owners quickly became the trigger for a new and unpredictable legal war, with both sides preparing for battle. The future of the NFA and the entire framework of federal gun regulation was suddenly thrown into doubt, with the nation watching closely. The celebration was short-lived as the country braced for a fierce legal battle that would shape the next chapter in America's gun debate. With the tax gone, gun rights groups launched Brown vs. ATF, a lawsuit aimed at the heart of the NFA. Their argument: if the NFA was only constitutional as a tax law, its registration requirements are now illegal. The government's power is limited. Without the tax, there's no constitutional basis for a federal gun registry. The lawsuit directly challenges the Supreme Court's old Sunzinski decision, arguing that the law has fundamentally changed. Now the NFA is just a registration mandate, not a tax. Plaintiffs say Congress lacks the authority to create such a registry. If they win, millions could buy suppressors and short-barreled firearms as easily as any other gun. It would be the largest deregulation of firearms in U.S. history. For gun rights advocates, this is the moment they've been waiting for. The stakes couldn't be higher. The Department of Justice isn't giving up on the NFA. Even under a pro-gun administration, government lawyers are fighting to preserve the law. Their first argument: the NFA is still a tax law since businesses that make or sell NFA items pay annual taxes. The registry, they say, is needed to enforce these business taxes. Their second argument: the Commerce Clause gives Congress power to regulate the interstate gun market. The DOJ claims the registry is a legitimate tool for tracking firearms across state lines. Gun rights groups call these arguments desperate overreach. They argue that a business tax can't justify a registry of private citizens' guns. The legal battle exposes a deep divide over federal power and gun rights. The outcome will shape the future of American gun ownership. The Supreme Court's 2022 Bruen decision changed everything. Courts can no longer balance public safety against gun rights. Now every gun law must have a clear historical precedent. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that only regulations consistent with the nation's historical tradition are constitutional. This history and tradition test is a powerful new weapon for gun rights advocates. In Brown vs. ATF, plaintiffs argue there's no historical tradition of federal gun registries. They say suppressors and short-barreled firearms are in common lawful use, not dangerous and unusual. The government now faces the burden of proving its laws fit within early American history. That's a tall order for modern regulations. The Bruen ruling has reset the rules, putting the government on the defensive. The legal landscape for gun laws has been transformed. Bruen's impact was immediate. Lower courts began striking down gun laws nationwide. Even the federal ban on new machine guns, in place since 1986, was ruled unconstitutional by some judges. Age-based restrictions fell too, with courts allowing 18-year-olds to buy handguns and get concealed carry permits. Gun rights groups are energized, seeing the courts finally affirm their view of the Second Amendment. The burden is now on the government to justify restrictions with historical evidence. However, the Supreme Court's Rahimi decision allowed some flexibility, upholding bans for those under domestic violence restraining orders. Courts can look for broader historical principles, not just exact analogs. Still, the trend is clear. Gun control faces unprecedented legal challenges. The post-Bruen era is redrawing the map of American gun law. The future of federal regulation hangs in the balance. The Brown versus ATF lawsuit is moving through the courts, and its outcome will reshape gun ownership in America. If gun rights groups win, the NFA registry could be struck down. Suppressors and short-barreled firearms would be sold like any other gun. Wait times and federal registration could disappear, transforming the market overnight. If the government prevails, the NFA's registry would stand, now justified by business taxes or the Commerce Clause. Either way, the Supreme Court will likely have the final say. The debate reflects deep divisions over the Second Amendment and federal power. For now, gun owners face uncertainty. The tax is gone, but registration remains, pending the court's decision. The legal chain reaction set off by Congress and the Trump administration is still unfolding. The final chapter of the NFA's story is yet to be written. Its conclusion will define American gun rights for decades to come.